All right, well, it's the, I guess it's not the top of the hour, it's the bottom of the hour. It's 9:30 Mountain Time, which means that we can get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Burgess. I'm the lab director here at ESIP, and I hope you are here for, let's see, I haven't even looked at the CEOS session. All right, so just a few quick reminders before we get started. Everyone's been doing a pretty good job, but just if you could ensure that you're muted during presentations. We would love to see faces during questions and discussion. And if you're a presenter, you could have your camera on, but most folks have been turning their cameras off during the actual presentation. Looks like Vardis put in the chat of the Zoom, or I put in the Kiko chat link, which has the notes document that has a sign in that the session leaders, you could put your name in. Also, just to familiarize yourself with the bottom of the Zoom toolbar with your reactions, and there's a hand raise function. The last, let's see, most people have reasonable, I can see their names, but if you're would like to participate in discussion and your name on the right isn't clear that what your first name is, so people can respond to your question if you have one. If you could just hover over your name in Zoom and rename yourself to a name that we can refer to you for questions and all of that, that would be wonderful. So Vardis, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Annie, and thanks everyone for coming to the session, which is essentially a kind of a mini workshop session, let's put it that way, on the coverage project. Coverage stands for CEOS Ocean Variables, Enabling Research and Applications for GEO. So the intent of this project really is to develop a prototype platform, providing more seamless access to interagency satellite, and also in situ data products in support of marine biodiversity applications. So I'll be explaining that, and welcome on behalf of all the team, several of whom will be presenting. There are a couple of people who could not make it, and I'd like to acknowledge them. Thomas Huang, also Jorge Vasquez, and Mike Chin. He was supposed to attend but is feeling unwell, so could not make it today. Okay. Oops, let me advance the slide. There we go. So just some preliminaries. In the Kiko chat Google Doc on page 2, there's a sign-in form. If you could please go ahead and do that. Further below, page 6, there's also a notes and comments section. If you want to capture any thoughts that you may have that you want to convey to us, you can put it in there. And I think someone will be monitoring the chat of the Zoom chat for questions and things. So the protocols, yeah, Annie went into that. Please keep muted until the Q&A session comes up. When the Q&A session is there, just raise your hand on the participant list of the Zoom, and then we'll hand over the mic to you in the sequence of arrivals, basically. Also very important, we have a survey, a Google Doc survey that we would appreciate people complete, once the session is over, and the links to that is also in the Google Doc. So maybe a brief introduction of the team who are going to be presenting today. My name is Vardis Tsontos. My role in the coverage project, I'm the principal investigator and kind of the glue between all of the different elements. Mike, who's not here, unfortunately, he's helping us with, on the remote sensing side, there's a product development component to this work as well, which we'll be explaining. And he's assisting us in making great progress there. Flynn, do you want to say a quick word about your activities for coverage?
Sure. Hi, I'm a software developer. I'm building the front-end visualization client to display and interact with in situ and remote data sets.
Excellent. And Jacob?
Hi, yeah, I'm Joe Jacob. I'm in charge of the analytics engine in coverage, and also and that would be specifically for the satellite data sets.
Joe Roberts.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Roberts. I'm a software engineer in the Science Data Visualization group at JPL. My role in this project is more as the backend developer for the visualization and the ingestion of the in situ data for coverage.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, a little bit about the goals and the agenda, which is also in the Kiko Chat Google Doc. So the goals really are just to introduce the coverage project to this community. We're going to demonstrate some capabilities live, and we really need and would appreciate your feedback. The agenda, it's tight. We have a total of 1.5 hours. And we're going to begin after this slide with an overview of the coverage project, which I'll be giving. Description of the level 4 chlorophyll product development work that's part of this project as well, which I'll be giving on behalf of Mike. A demonstration of the web-based visualization tool from Flynn, the coverage analytics capability from Joe Jacob, and the in situ data integration pipelines and backend by Joe Roberts. So we'd like, as much as possible, given the limited time, we'd like some discussion as well, and there's some opportunity for Q&A. But feel free to reach out to us also after this meeting as well if you have further questions. Okay, I think we're pretty much on track.
Artis, this is Ed here. Quickly, can I ask you something? In the other ESIP sessions I've attended, there was a Slido channel for asking questions. So as
yeah,
we're talking and we ask questions, where should we put those?
You can put them in the Zoom chat.
Zoom chat, got it.
Yeah, we haven't set up for Slido, so I didn't know that was available until recently. So, okay, just a quick overview of the project. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of what coverage is all about from a technical perspective as well, I just wanted to describe a little bit the higher level motivation for this project. So, the origin of coverage really is an attempt to better realize the potential of Earth observation data in its diverse forms to support new and also underserved user communities by addressing some key technical constraints to access and usage. And those typically focus around, based on our experience, on challenges of product selection and also the mechanics of usage of the data. A second real big motivator for us is that we feel there's an imperative out there now to better marshal available Earth observations of different types in support of ocean science and marine resource management applications for societal benefit. There's a lot of data out there, but it's the integration piece that is a challenge for a lot of people. And so we, part of what we're trying to do here is to develop some improved data infrastructures and services that can provide access to diverse observations for the oceans to promote their more integrated and efficient usage. So to do that, though, there's some basic challenges here, and we are talking about very heterogeneous types of data and also very diverse data delivery and access mechanisms. So how do we kind of crosswalk that and attempt to harmonize that? And a lot of that also, especially when you get to the in situ and biological data, there are challenges related to in situ data interoperability. That's huge. And so, coverage is trying to make headroads in a dent, basically, in all of these issues. But obviously, this is bigger than any one project or even any one agency perhaps can tackle. And that's why we're doing it within CEOS and also engaging the ESIP community. So Coverage is an international initiative led by NASA within CEOS, the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, and it's endorsed as a 3-year pilot project. For those of you not familiar with CEOS, it's basically a coordinating body between the different space agencies internationally that work on satellite observations in terms of Earth observations, okay? So it's a cross-cutting collaborative effort within CEOS. And as I said, the intent really is to enable more widespread use of ocean satellite data products in support of science and applications for societal benefit. And the way we're going to try to tackle this problem is in terms of implementation of an advanced technology platform that provides improved access to data and value-added data and services. Okay, so the value-added piece is critical. We know that there's a lot of data distribution going out there, but it's the integration and value-added component that we are kind of focusing on here. And it's not just enough to put a system together. We actually want to demonstrate its practical utility in support of some thematic applications, which in this particular case relates to environmental dynamics in high seas pelagic population, fish pelagic populations. So we know this kind of thing is needed. It's a response to needs of the ocean community for improved, more seamless access to analysis-ready data. In support also of some of the UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and number 14 in particular, that relates to marine biodiversity and sustainable ecosystem-based resource management. And so that's an important piece. The stakeholder component, we are interfacing and have partners with several agencies and groups, some of which are summarized here in terms of their icons. So we acknowledge their support and contributions. And several of these agency representatives are included in our CEOS advisory board, okay, which we meet with periodically for guidance on strategic matters and other things. Obviously included amongst them, given the biological component, we have representatives from the GEO Marine Biodiversity Observation Network as well. The CEOS virtual constellations representing sea surface temperature, winds, altimetry, and also ocean color radiometry. And of course, this is NASA funded, so we report to headquarters directly. So coverage has a phased development approach. Okay, we're currently in phase B, which is development of a prototype system and set of capabilities, which has been a 1-year activity that started last October and should complete October of this year. That was preceded by a technical scoping activity where we identified the data inputs, the interfaces, and the thematic application, developed the advisory board, etc. And of course, all of that was preceded by an actual roughly 1-year period of socializing this within CEOS and getting the initiative approved. If we are successful with phase B, there would be a phase C, which would aim to develop a more fully fledged system, potential evaluation of both the project and the system as a phase D with a potential pathway to sustained operations. How that would happen is still to be determined, though. Okay, so in phase C, we did this sort of dataset inventory review, and that involved looking at some of the satellite data products for the oceans available from the various space agencies. And we had certain criteria in mind. Basically, we were looking at a coherent set of baseline products for the 4 key parameters, so SST, winds, SSH, and ocean color, across these the ocean disciplines. The coverage needed to be global, near real time if possible, multi-year series, gap-free. So we're talking about level 4 type data, and so in a more sort of analysis-ready form, okay, for users, less expert users in particular, and of course interoperable data formats. So amazingly, perhaps, with inputs from the CEOS VCs, we were able to come up with a consensus of a baseline set of products and a shortlist for coverage that's included. So we have a few products from each agencies for each parameter, basically. So it's a highly curated list, high quality products that add value to each other. And this exercise, actually, there were several interesting results, but one of the surprising things was that we discovered that there was actually a paucity of a level 4 ocean color product. So NASA currently does not develop such a product. So in phase B, to address that gap, we specifically included a work component to include that, to develop that. And based on the Muir SST MRVA algorithm. So I'll be describing a little bit about that later. So in terms of the thematic application, there's a lot of interest and the need by agencies involved in fisheries management, both nationally and internationally in intergovernmental agencies, in terms of leveraging and using satellite data products for decision support. And the kind of analyses they're interested in is habitat analyses and how that is changing under climate change scenarios for highly migratory species, transboundary stocks, basically. There's interest in operational spatial catch forecasting, and of course, very importantly, bycatch mitigation. So those are three key areas. And there's a range of stakeholder agencies that we've actually been engaging with, including some of these regional fisheries management organizations for tuna and tuna-like species, of which there are 5 globally. And one of those is conveniently based in San Diego. So we've had quite a few direct interactions with those. And of course, GEO-MBON, which is the network within GEO for dealing with marine biodiversity type observations. So the kinds of supporting data that we have been targeting is these historical time series, which is a unique and very important data set. Okay, it's actually used in management of these commercially harvested and important tuna species. So it's spatial catch and effort by species. It's coarse. The public data is actually coarsely gridded, but it's available for a very extensive time series. So it's a great record of what's going on at a sort of higher trophic level within the marine ecosystem globally. Okay. We are also including some emerging electronic tagging type data sets, which are basically high resolution trajectory profile type series, and AIS fisheries vessel movement data from Global Fishing Watch. Okay, this figure kind of summarizes at a high level the distributed system architecture of coverage. The 2 red dots are our 2 satellite data nodes that host a common stack of coverage software, okay, as you can see in those blue boxes, okay? And so the NASA JPL AWS node provides access to the US satellite products. And the node that's based at UMETSAT, hosted on their Wikio cloud platform, contains the EU Copernicus Marine Environmental Monitoring System data products for the project. So the intent here, the whole concept of the cloud is you can provide analytics closer to the data without extensive movements of data. So that's one thing we're aiming to exercise here. Basically routes the user who doesn't really need to understand the details of this kind of system diagram and where the data is coming from. They're just interested in getting the data and results, okay? So the system, would, depending on the query, push the user basically to get the data from the appropriate source. And in the case where the user wants an integrated analytics result from both sources, it would essentially compile the results and return just the results without having to move all of the data for their analyses. Okay, and then we have the in situ pieces. So in the blue, we have connectivity, direct connectivity to the animal telemetry data repositories at IMOS and CSIRO in Australia and within the US ATN, Animal Telemetry Network. The brown dots are essentially the RFMO data sets that I mentioned. And there you see the dotted lines, and that means that essentially those data we are actually hosting copies of at JPL. Okay, and the reason is because even though these data sets are very similar in terms of the type of information that they provide, in terms of they're maintained in ad hoc CSV type files with limited metadata. And so a degree of harmonization needs to happen before you can actually sort of integrate these things. So I have done that, and we are hosting these data for the time being. The intent is really to actually work with these data providers to improve the data interoperability of their data sets to ensure direct access. Similar considerations apply to the Global Fishing Watch AIS products. And you'll also notice a green dot there. So we have an external collaborator who is an animal telemetry expert. Now, the intent here is to show that we can, in addition to connecting to national repositories, that we can actually provide access to data from independent data providers, because not all of this in situ data is going to the national repositories. And again, we are aiming to provide centralized access to all these data resources through our portal. Okay, so I see I'm kind of short on time, so I'm just going to skip through this very quickly. There are quite a few software tools and services that have been developed under different NASA-funded technology projects that we're leveraging here. And that's a list, and we'll be going into some of those in the demo. Okay, there's also the cloud infrastructure, so AWS on the JPL side, and also Wikio for the EUMETSAT and Node. That's based on this Morpheus cloud application orchestration platform. Okay, and the goal here is really to develop a reusable platform for Earth science data and analytics with an enhanced set of capabilities, one that is scalable, allows users to better search for and seamlessly access and visualize and work with high volume heterogeneous satellite and in situ data sets. Very briefly, an important part of the project is as well the stakeholder and community engagement, including the workshop here. We had one at Ocean Sciences as well. That was very successful. We have several conference presentations that we've given over time. And of course, these stakeholder consultations that I mentioned. The next sort of biggie for us is these at the CEOS technical workshop meeting in September, a kind of a side meeting event where we will be hosting a workshop. So we've developed a website and portal, but we're waiting for NASA approval to make that public. For project announcements, please follow us at this link here, coverage_CEOS. And we have a YouTube channel where we post video demonstrations and tutorials. And we're probably over time for the questions, so I'm going to skip this and go on to the next talk, but we can perhaps talk more in the discussion session a bit later. Okay, in terms of the satellite product development that I mentioned, the L4 chlorophyll product, okay, the motivation here is that, especially in coastal areas and in areas that are where there's a lot of biological productivity, cloud cover is a major issue. And so how do we address the problem of these spatial data gaps? Our approach is to leverage a set of algorithms developed for SST by JPL, this Muir SST, and used for this Muir SST product that's very popular. and apply that basically as a high fidelity interpolation and data fusion method also for ocean color. And again, one of the motivations of this was our discovery that there are actually very few, well, there were none, and now there is one level 4 ocean color product, and that's available by the Europeans Globe Color. And that's based on an OI technique, which, you know, spatially, more locally tends to over smooth things. So we feel we could do better, and that's what we've been doing. And I think the results are quite promising, as you will see. The other advantage is that, you know, irrespective of resolution, in order to compare across variables, you really, you know, in a consistent manner, you really ideally need to develop those products based on the same kind of interpolation and data fusion method. And that's what we're doing here. For SST and Ocean Color, both used by coverage, we are using the same methodology, this MRVA analysis. Okay. So very briefly on this, and so MRVA is based on this wavelet decomposition methodology, which provides a means of doing multi-scale analysis. And basically what it does is it decomposes pattern variability across scales, spatial components, basically. So it's kind of analogous to the Fourier transform, if you're familiar with, but it has several key advantages. And one is that it's very flexible in terms of the waveform function that you use for this. So not necessarily just a sine or cosine wave. Okay, so there's flexibility in that. And perhaps more critically, it's a methodology that allows resolution of localized spatial components, which basically allows very accurate reconstruction and resolution of local features. Okay. And it provides effectively a consistent and scale-free analysis and interpolation method, as kind of indicated in these figures here. You can run the analysis essentially at any scale and produce a product through the same mechanism at any sort of arbitrary scale that's necessary. And that's what we've done here. You know, coverage focuses on 25 kilometers. But the actual analysis could be taken down to a much higher resolution or even coarser. Okay, so here are some preliminary results that are very promising. On the left, you see a map of the Ocean Color product, our MRVA product, overlaid with data from Saildrone, and this is around Baja off of Southern California. And you can see the extreme patchiness of the chlorophyll in this figure. And so we use this data set. Saildrone collects fluorimeter data, and so so effectively measures chlorophyll. And so we could do a basic validation analysis. And the plot in the middle shows the excellent agreement between the satellite data product, the level 4 results from MRVA compared to the Saildrone in situ data that have been co-located. Those blue bars indicate, you know, there's a lot of spatial variability at very fine scales, okay, when being picked up by the Saildrone in situ measurements. But, you know, and of course, the satellite observations are in a daily time interval. But we're able to pick up the patterns exceedingly well, and it's very promising. The figure on the right shows what the global product looks like right now, and also we provide an uncertainty characterization of the chlorophyll field as well. So in terms of next steps, we are confident enough to move forward with complete processing of this data. We're going to be doing some further validation based on in situ databases that are out there, nomads and sea bass and mermaids and others. And we've already done this Saildrone Arctic campaign into comparison. And for phase C, we have some ideas as well, how to improve things further to get the product down to 1 kilometer, which would be gap-free, which would be a game changer. Okay, that's me done. Again, I'm over time, so so as not to take away from the colleagues. If you have questions, let's take it up in the discussion portion. So Flynn, if you want to share your screen and take over, I'll stop sharing.
Sure. All right. So yeah, I'll be demonstrating the front-end visualization tool that we've been developing as part of this effort. So as Vardis was describing, our main focus has been to develop a system architecture that integrates both in situ and remote sensing data sets for better use and access by researchers and scientists alike. And so this is the portal that we've been developing as part of that effort. We just call it our data viewer. And I'll walk you through some of the key features of this tool. So here on the in the center of the screen, you can see we have a large global map, and this is where we display any of our data sets. And here on the right-hand side, we have our search panel. So we have it split between both in situ and satellite data sets, and both of these, you can search for any data set based on area. So if you're only interested in, say, the Atlantic, you can search for data sets that are available there, and you can search by date range as well. Any of the variables that these tracks, any of these in situ data sets happen to contain, the platform, sensor, and program. Now, any of these results, we also maintain a set of what we hope is fairly comprehensive metadata. So you can look at where the program, mission, platform, instrument, the variables, the range, the spatial range, as well as a description of each of these data sets. And these vary on project and tag. And we collect these from our providers, and some of these we are currently filling in ourselves to proof out the architecture. But as we go forward, we're hoping to get sort of a standardized set of ingestion information from all of our providers. So what can you do with these? I'm just going to go through a few examples here. So we have one of our main sets of in situ data sets are animal tracks. And so I'm going to turn on a few Atlantic bluefin tuna tracks that we have. And over here in the upper left-hand corner of the tool, we have our layer controls. So I'm going to zoom into these tracks, and all three of these are roughly coincident in time in 2010 through 2011. And they're off the eastern seaboard here. Now it's kind of hard to see a couple of them, so I'm going to change their color to have a little bit more contrast with the background there. And now you can get a rough sense very quickly of the spatial range of these tracks. And then as I hover over them, you can see we resolve the location and the number of times we have a sample for that location for this track. And this comes more into play with some of our other in situ data sets, such as buoys or ships that might stay at a single location for much longer than one day. Now here I'm going to click on one of these tracks, basically at any point, and you can see there's this little dot that appears on the track, and this indicates the location on the track at the current date. And that is reflected down here in the bottom left hand of the screen. There's this little date indicator. That is your currently active date. And as I step forward through that, you can see I'm changing the active date, and the highlighted point on the track itself is also updating. Now what I'm going to do now is come over to my satellite data sets, and you can see we have several remote sensing data sets, everything from sea surface height and sea surface height anomaly. We have some wind speed layers, chlorophyll. This is the data set that we were talking about earlier. We only have some data from it in 2017 currently as we go through some processing. And what I'm going to turn on for reference here is this sea surface temperature layer. And this is the Muir SST that's developed by NASA Measures that integrates many different platforms and instruments together. And you can see this is a full description of it. But I'm going to turn that on for some more visual reference here, and I'll close that side panel. So now some of those tracks are a little bit harder to see, so I'm going to change the colors again. And now I'm going to click back on another point on the track, and you can see as I change the time, not only is the highlight on the track changing, but we're also seeing the remote sensing data set update as well. So we can have we can compare the in situ to the remote sensing track, or the remote sensing satellite data set as well. And what we can do to investigate that a little bit more closely, if I come over to the in situ controls, you can see I have a set animation range option here. So I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to adjust the date interval here to highlight 1 week instead of 1 day at a time. You can see these active highlights just expanded a little bit to cover 1 week of the track instead of just 1 day of the track at a time. And I'm going to start loading that animation. Now, hopefully my internet connection isn't slowed down too much by streaming over this conference. But what it's going to do, it's going to preload some of the remote sensing satellite frames, and then it's going to automatically step through that date range. And so now it's probably a little bit hard to see through this shared screen, but at every step, we are seeing the satellite data set step forward a week, and then same thing with the in situ satellite, or with the in situ data sets. And we can just watch and see if there's any sort of correlation between the position of these fish with the satellite data sets. And it does seem, as they go through, that these fish tend to stay in the same rough sea surface temperature block. You know, it's sort of this blue and green temperatures, and they tend to shy away from these more red temperatures, which if we come over and look on our color bar here, we can see they seem to be preferring something between the 17 and 20s, maybe lower, maybe 13 sea surface temperature, but they're shying away from anything above the 25s, I'd say, roughly speaking. But let's say that that's not enough for us. We need to investigate this a little bit more fine-grained. So if we come back to our control panel, here we can go to our third tab, charts now. And let's take a look at, first, we'll make a quick chart of these three data sets, these three in situ data sets, just looking at time versus depth. So this is 3 tracks on fish of the same species in roughly the same area. And so we're going to see if we can resolve any sort of similarities between these fish tracks at a course level, let's say. So here we have the 3 depth plots of the fish plotted over one another. And so we can turn them off and on, and we can see that roughly speaking, they do follow the same structure. There's kind of this bimodal distribution here. There's where they're going very deep and then shallow again, and then deep again. And this third track looks like it follows the same pattern, and it just has some extra data on the end. And you can see there's this black bar indicated here on the chart. If I zoom in on that, We're going to load in some more high resolution data as we zoom in, but this black bar is the same current date indication as is indicated on the track with this highlighted section of the track. And let me close this animation down, as indicated by this active date range here down in the lower left-hand corner. And as I step through here again, you can see the chart updates as well. So you can visually link what is displayed on the chart from what is displayed on the map. So, with that, what we can also do is we'll change this date range to something like 3 days at a time. And now we'll say, link this chart to the current date interval. And now whenever I update the time, the chart will automatically update to show just that section of the time range within the chart. And with something like a 3-day date range for an animal like a tuna, what we can see is the diurnal cycle of these animals. So you can see how during one part of the day, they tend to dive very deep, and then they come up to the shallows and then dive back down, and then up to the shallows and dive back down. And that's immediately apparent across these 3 tracks. But again, what we're interested in is satellite with the in situ. So let's make a new chart. Again, we have the 3 tracks selected, time and depth, and this time we're going to add on, we're going to color it by the external temperature. And right now it's fetching and decimating all of the data for all 3 of these tracks and then returning it back for a single chart. And so now here, it gets a little bit muddy because we have the 3 tracks and they're all trying to color in the, or apply the same z-axis coloring. Just wait a moment. These are fairly dense data sets. And so it looks like pulling over the data for each of them takes a little bit longer than I was hoping. And now let's try setting some bounds on the z-axis. So let's max out the z-axis at 25 degrees. So now we're coloring specifically between 0 and 25, and you can see where these fish tracks tend to be landing in terms of temperature. But again, this is a little bit harder to see, so let's close these down. We'll turn off the z-axis, and we'll make it a simple 2-dimensional track, or 2-dimensional chart with the time and external temperature. And now here we can start to piece out a little bit more directly what the actual temperature that these animals were experiencing. And so let's zoom in. Actually, let me just link that to the currently selected date range. So now we're looking at the 3 days of this Atlantic bluefin tuna, ID 5110022. And so that'll be our black track here. So I'm going to zoom in on the active portion of that track here. And now on the remote sensing satellite, we can see it's in this dark blue, light blue range. And if we look at that on here, that's somewhere between maybe 11 up to 15 degrees Celsius, somewhere in that range. And if we compare that to what we're seeing on the actual measured track, you can see that's going up right here at the higher end of the temperature, which would probably be at the surface. You can see we're right around that 11 to 15 degree range. So you can see this parity between what we're seeing in the remote sensing data with what is measured from in situ data. And this is something that we can achieve not only with animal tracks, but also with other in situ data sets, such as drifters or ship tracks, instruments that are hung off the edge of ships as they go trawling through the ocean. So I'm going to try to turn on in these last moments of the demo here. We have a track. This is a track from the salinity process in the Upper Ocean Regional Study. There's just some sensors hung off the edge of a ship as they sailed out into the Atlantic and then back to the eastern seaboard. And you can see we have all the same interactions, although this data set is much more dense. Over 3 days it covered a much greater range. But this we can zoom down into 6-hour time ranges here. And if I have time, I'll attempt to show the same thing. Of a time versus temperature chart for this data set. And within this 6-hour window that I have highlighted here, you can see it's crossing the Gulf Stream. Oh, looks like that is a no-go for this demonstration. And unfortunately, I believe I have hit my 15-minute mark.
Flynn, is it because y-axis needs to be depth? Try that. And the z-axis is temperature.
I may have also selected we have the two Endeavor tracks, and I may have selected the wrong one.
Right, that's a possibility.
Yeah, I believe this is the track that I think it is.
Do the other one if you don't worry about it. Just yeah. No, that's not it. Yeah, so there's a glitch, but that certainly used to work fine.
Yeah, yeah. So unfortunately, that one isn't coming through the way that it normally does. But those are live demos for you. But yeah, that is roughly an overview of the tool that we've been building. There's some few other features, but those are the main capabilities that we've been developing in pairing the in situ data with remote sensing data sets within one tool. So unless there are any pressing questions, I think I'll pass it back to you, Vardis.
Yeah, thanks. And maybe there's time for a couple of quick questions. I've been answering a few through the chat. There was one relating to the availability of this tool online. So it's not public yet, right? So it's still under development. But by September, we hope to have the portal up and these services integrated. There were a range of questions relating to the in situ, the animal telemetry data, their metadata, some of the approaches to improving the geolocations on the electronic tagging data sets. That's a big issue for these data sets. So we're just exposing whatever metadata and data that the data providers at CSIRO, IMOS, ATN provide with these tracks. So and in some cases, the metadata on the methodologies of the processing of these track data is very limited. Okay, so that's an area that needs to be improved upon by the data providers. Okay, any other burning questions? You can put it in the chat, and we can address those in the discussion portion, perhaps. So let me, Flynn, if you could stop sharing your screen. Excellent. And then I will share mine. So thank you. Let's see. Oh, yeah, these were a couple of intro slides. The slide set is available on the shed, so you can download it and look at it. But these were some of the additional data sets that are included. Okay, the next presentation is by Joe Jacobs on the analytics component. So I'm going to stop sharing again, Joe. Oh, actually, let me skip ahead to the slides and just tell me when to advance to the next one before you start your demo.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Vardis. Yeah, so another goal of this project is to enable analytics on these data sets, some of which could be very large. And we want to enable analytics on that large data without requiring any data download. So this eliminates the old workflow where you would have to download many NetCDF files to your laptop and try to extract the data you're in the region you're interested in, and then and do all this data wrangling. So we're trying to eliminate that and simplify it by making an interface that can be called from any language. So I'll be showing some Python calls here. And we do that by using web service calls, which are supported very widely. And also like a visualization tool such as the one that Flynn showed, could make calls into this system. So the analytics engine that we've adopted is SDAP, the Science Data Analytics Platform. And in past ESIPs, we've reported on SDAP, but I'll just review some of the key features and functionality here. SDAP is based on the concept of data tiling. So we carve up the data set measurements into spatial tiles, and then we import those tiles into cloud-aware databases. And we use two databases. One is called Solar. In Solar, we put the granule metadata and the spatial bounds of each tile. Another database we use is called Cassandra. In Cassandra, we store the actual data measurements. So looking up the data for a given bounding box involves first querying Solar for the tiles that intersect that bounding box. And then we retrieve the actual measurement data for those tiles from Cassandra. And once the data is retrieved, we're able to do various analytics on the data. They're all implemented in what is called a MapReduce style of programming. So the various data are assumed to be embarrassingly parallel in the map function. And then we can very quickly scale the computations across either nodes on a local cluster or instances out on a public cloud, for instance, and get our results. And then the result would be provided back to the user's client program. And down in the lower right there, that's the website for SDAP. You can check it out. It's fully developed in open source. So yeah, next slide, Vardis. So I'll show a quick demonstration in a Jupyter notebook. The Jupyter server is actually hosted at JPL, the one I'm using anyway. And then I'll be issuing web service calls to an SDAP deployment that's out on AWS. It's a fairly lightweight deployment with 3 worker nodes that host the Solar and Cassandra databases, and also the executors for the computations. And then there's one master node, and that hosts the web tier and handles the incoming job requests. Okay, so next slide. Yeah, we'll I'll go ahead now and share my screen and proceed with a Jupyter demo showing some of these capabilities. Oops. There we go. Yeah, so now what you see here on my screen is a Jupyter notebook. Here I'm using snippets of code in Python that make these web service calls into our SDAP instance running live on AWS. So in order to make these calls, we need to construct a URL for the web service call. And one thing I need to set up here is the base for that URL, which is the load balancer address ahead of on our web tier in our deployment. And that's what you see here. And don't worry about this. This is not a public website yet, but it will be eventually. So I'm going to go ahead and run that cell. And now that target is set up. And next I'll set up the bounding box, the data set name, and the time range for our demonstration. And here I've chosen a, what is it, a 30 by 15 degree box in the Gulf of Alaska here in a 1 year time period for demonstration purposes. So here I'm looking at the year 2017. And the green box here shows the bounding box. So one of the endpoints that we've developed is just a simple list operation, which shows the inventory that we have ingested in this particular SDAP deployment. And you can see the various data sets are listed here. And they're a mix of some NASA and NOAA data sets and some from CMEMS. So we have some European data sets and some in the United States. Ultimately, we'll be hosting the US-based data sets in the AWS deployment, and we'll have another SDAP deployment on the European cloud GEO, which Vardis mentioned earlier. But here I have a few of the data sets from each category hosted at AWS. And I'll be running some analytics on our sea surface temperature data sets shown here. So I'll go ahead and proceed. First, I'm doing a time series calculation. And here we're averaging spatially at each timestamp and producing a single result at each timestamp and to get our time series. And there's two ways that SDAP can be called. One is using service calls, and here's an example URL. This consists of the base of our SDAP deployment, the load balancer address, and then an algorithm endpoint name, followed by all of the parameters needed for that algorithm. In this case, we need the data set, the bounding box, and the time range. So obviously this is just a URL. I could copy and paste this into a web browser and get our result back. It could also be called from various languages, and it could be integrated into like the visualization tools, such as what Flynn showed, and that's what we'll be doing in the remainder of this year. Now, an alternative way to call SDAP is using our Python API. So here we call this the Nexus CLI. Nexus is the analytic engine built into SDAP. And then the CLI, the command line interface. So here, this is calling the same endpoint, but using Python objects as the input. And you can see so that time series ran in a few seconds, and we can go ahead and plot the result. And here you can see the seasonal cycle is clearly evident over this 1 year time range. We also have an option to remove that seasonal cycle if desired. So another analytic algorithm we have built into SDAP is what's called a time average map. And in this one, whereas with time series, we average spatially at each timestamp. In this one, in time average map, we average over time at each grid cell location to get a mean at each grid cell. So the result is actually a two-dimensional map. And again, we can call this with a web service call or with the Python API. In this case, we used a web service call here, and it also ran in a few seconds. And I should mention that the result that comes back from any of these analytics is in a format called JSON, which is a great format for web service programming. So like different web applications can communicate with each other using JSON, and it's also fairly readable, for a user. And let me just show a sample of what the JSON response looks like for that time average map. Here you can see we have our coordinates, and we get a mean back for each coordinate. And we also report the count of the number of grid cells that were averaged for each mean, because there may be fill values in there, or missing data. And you can see we must be missing one day out of the 365 days in the year in these particular coordinates. So with JSON, I can very easily extract the data from the JSON response and plot it. So here I'm using matplotlib, which is just a standard Python module for plotting, and I can very quickly produce a 2D plot of the time average map. And then, in this notebook, I have various other analytics built in. In the remaining time, I just wanted to show one CMEMS data set. And here I'll do another analytic algorithm called the correlation map, which takes two data sets that are on the same coordinate grid and produces the correlation coefficients at each grid cell. So that's running right now, and you can see that it has a very similar format to the others. What's different here is the data set. Here there's two variables provided, separated by a comma, and here I'm coordinating the a wind speed and what's called a wind stress curl data set from CMEMS. And the result, so in this case, I have the result being plotted here, and you can see the result here. Keep in mind, I'm a computer scientist. I'm not an oceanographer, so I'm not sure if there's any significance to this, and I didn't discuss what variables are being correlated here with any scientists. So, but I'm sure there's a Nobel Prize in this result somewhere. You can see the apparently near the coast, the correlation is higher,
right,
than further out. So that concludes the demonstration.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. If you could stop sharing. And
okay, I'll turn it back to you, Varis.
Yeah, oops. Oh, sorry, I lost where I was. Okay.
You also need to share your screen.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Apologies for that. Oop. Sorry. There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Joe, for that. Oop. And now Joe Roberts will describe the in situ data pipelines and backend support for that. So, Joe, take it away in terms of your audio.
Hi, everyone. Having a little bit of a flaky internet connection issue, so apologies if I start sounding like a robot. So I'll be demonstrating the in situ data ingestion piece and also talk about how we connect to some of the satellite imagery layers. So on this slide, so Vardis showed this earlier, and I guess the point here is that within coverage, we're trying to connect to these different nodes around the world. So we have the satellite data located here at JPL and also with EUMETSAT in their Wakio cloud. But I'm going to focus more on the in situ nodes. And the data that will be demonstrating is coming from our friends in Australia at CSIRO and IMOS. So if you can go on to the next slide, Vardis. So this is a diagram of the backend architecture. So we're getting data from CSIRO and IMOS through their GEO server web services. And GEO server is really an open source map server where it connects to a variety of geospatial data and makes it accessible over the web. And we built this sort of custom in situ ingester, which is really a set of Python scripts that sort of act as data handlers, connecting to these different geo servers and pulling those data sets into our Postgres SQL database. So we're usually using traditional database technology to basically store the harvested data. We use materialized views to sort of standardize how the data appears to whatever's connecting to the database. And we've also set up a similar database with these materialized views at CSIRO to, the idea was originally to directly connect to that, but there's some, some constraints doing that across different, across the world, basically. So once the data is available, we set up our own GeoServer instance to make the in situ data available to the mapping client. We also use Solar, which indexes all of the data and makes the metadata available for searching. And there's this dynamic decimation piece that Flynn touched on briefly during his demo, which basically reduces the number of points available to the front end so that we're not loading tons of data all at once, really just to speed things up. There's also the two boxes on the top refer to the satellite image data set. So we're pulling in the satellite imagery from the Global Imagery Browser Services, or GIBS, which I'm also part of that project. And we've set up instances of the open source On Earth server, which is the same server that's used for GIBS to serve out tiled imagery. So there's On Earth running on our local AWS here at JPL and one running on Wakio as well. And the front-end web client is essentially just connecting to those services. It's using WebMap Tile service, which is a standard OGC specification for connecting to tiled imagery. So if you go on to the next slide, Vardis. So I'm going to give a brief demo of just showing off how we're connecting to IMOS and CSIRO and pulling some of their data, running this ingestion script for each of those providers, and basically just showing the data appearing in Postgres and then Solar, and also seeing it on the map client. So I'll try to share my screen. Let's see here. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Not yet.
Nope.
All right, had to enable some security setting there. So hopefully you guys are seeing this.
Not yet. Joe, if it's problematic, what I could do is run the video that you had produced before. If you can't do it, and share that myself here. If you're having problems sharing your screen. Hello? Joe? Can anyone else hear me?
I can hear you, Vardis.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I can.
Just wondering.
I think we
Yeah.
lost Joe, Robert.
I
Yeah,
think we may have
don't
lost.
Perhaps start that video, Vardis, while we're waiting for.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Let me see. Here it is. Okay. Sorry. Okay, let me skip ahead.
Vardis, we can't hear the audio. Also, you might want to go to full screen.
Okay, so you can't hear the audio. I'm not sure how to fix that. Let's see. That may do it, hopefully. Can you hear?
Nope.
No audio? Yeah, I'm not sure how to fix that. Maybe just enjoy the visuals.
Well, James put the link in the chat.
Yeah.
Just for people to watch afterwards might be helpful. I think that's the same video that you're showing.
Thank you.
Maybe Vardis, if you try playing the videos over the computer speakers with the computer microphone activated, you would allow us to hear us, because I think you're probably using a headset or something, right?
Okay, let me pull the headset
Is that better?
Oh, we can hear your voice, but I can't quite hear the video if it is
Okay.
playing. It's very faint.
So this data looks like this.
Is that as high as the volume can go? Sounding pretty muffled.
The transformation steps of our script will automatically take in order to translate this back to form of articles. So I'm going to go back and copy.
Yeah, Bart, it's just Ed again. I don't think this is really working.
Hey, Vardis, sorry, I'm back on.
Maybe Joe can live
Say again?
simulcast. Maybe Joe can simulcast the video.
Yeah. Look, we're already, 15 minutes, I guess, left in the session. So apologies for that. Obviously, I guess he had issues with internet connectivity there. So maybe what we do is just, it works. Okay. So obviously we're getting those data. Maybe you can check out that video on your own time, and we can just return to the Q&A. So can everyone see my screen right now? Hello?
Yes, discussion?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So there is the survey. If you could at some point complete that in your own time. So I have a couple of discussion comments. I think I've addressed quite a few questions through the chat. But if there are any kind of questions that folks may have, just let's fire away at some of those. Here are some possible discussion topics in the remaining time. What do you think? Hello?
We can hear you, Vardis.
Yep, keep it going.
I'm hearing some other presenter in the background.
Oh.
Yeah, there's so there's some interference from another session.
I'm just hearing your voice, Vardis.
Oh, I'm hearing in my head. Maybe I'm hearing voices, but
is it possible the YouTube video is continuing?
No, I've closed. Okay, it's better now. Okay, so anyway, these are some possible topics for discussion. Also offline, if you guys want to follow up with us. But in general, we'd like to hear back from you whether we are kind of on the right track with some of these technical approach, interest in the thematic application, the appropriateness of the selection of some of the data. What do you think about some of our tools and services? What else? What other capabilities would you like to see included? And also, we want to do this in a collaborative way. We're doing this collaboratively within CEOS, but I think there's opportunities for doing things both on the technical front, also on aspects of data interoperability with ESIP and people involved in this community. So we'd really like to reach out to you guys and hope that anyone interested would follow up with us, because we are sort of looking ahead to a phase C activity and what extensions that could entail. Okay, so we want this to be a kind of a community-driven development, and so your feedback and inputs would be most helpful. let's see if there are any questions or if you want to address some of these points, maybe just take the mic and fire away your questions.
If artists, this is Joe Jacob.
Yes.
James Monroe had a great question in the chat. I was just starting to type a response there, but I perhaps just
Okay,
more efficient just to.
James, why don't you take the mic and ask your question?
Sure. My question has, so I'll let Joe respond to it, but I'll just sort of say it again. In terms of these analytics pipelines that we're developing, so I'm involved in the PanGeo community, and we use tools like Xarray as the data transport, and then we'll use DAS for parallelization and either TileDB or ZAR for the data format. And I see a lot of similarities in the problems it's solving with SDAP and Nexus, but it's a different sort of tool chain. And so just in terms of me as an oceanographer who wants to look at remote sensing data in the morning, and in the afternoon, I want to look at an ocean forecast model, and then I want to compare the two, it'd be great if I'm sort of getting a common look and feel. So my question has to do with why, on a technical side, you decided to go with this SDAP, Nexus, Cassandra DB approach, as opposed to or contrasted with what other different ways of doing large-scale geospatial analysis with people are doing.
So maybe I can just start quickly and just say that, you know, right now this is an open area. I mean, I don't think there's one comprehensive and totally satisfactory technical solution out there. So I think it's important to explore different options. And obviously, you know, SDAP is a JPL development. When we wrote the proposal, you know, that was something that, at the time at least, seemed like to be the best solution for us. Okay, but that doesn't mean that in future and other nodes can't support other backend infrastructures for satellite data. And you know, the question also relates to in situ data. Okay, so we are also looking at other approaches for handling analytics, not only on the satellite side, but in terms of the in situ data. So I'm not convinced that there is a totally satisfactory solution out there. And so I think it's important to try different things. But Joe, maybe if you have any other comments on that.
Yeah, so I mean, James makes a great point too. When SDAP was being developed, these other data technologies, you know, weren't in existence yet. At that time we made a decision to use Solar and Cassandra. Also, our input is the whatever is provided by the data providers. Like we're not producing new data sets. So many of these, you know, at the DAX, you know, we have NetCDF for most of our data sets. So we, you know, we're using whatever is provided by the data provider as our input. But yeah, I mean, we are very interested in ZAR as well. I mean, that it sounds like a great technology, especially with moving to the cloud. You know, you can do the range gets, you know, on S3, you know, if you have NetCDF files, and like, you know, ZAR is another solution. And then in terms of using DASC, currently in SDAP, we are using Spark as our parallelization engine. And, you know, that again has a long history, you know, and SDAP is being used in several different public services at JPL and NASA right now. And I mean, you know, it's using Spark and all of those currently. But in the past year, we do have a new development to provide an option to use DASC as well. From a programming point of view, you know, it's very similar. It's the map-reduce style of computation, and it's just a matter of how the mapper is written. From a user perspective, we hope to make it completely transparent. so the user doesn't have to worry about which technology is being used behind the scenes. You know, all they know is they get their result back, and they get it back very quickly. So yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes, we are looking at the new technologies, and as for various projects, you know, many of them may be folded into SDAP as well in the future. But,
Great.
no.
Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes, so let's use the time.
Well, if I could follow up with from James's question. So this is Chris Ennis from NASA, and I saw a lot of commonality between what you're doing and what the multi-mission algorithm and analysis platform is doing as well, although they are using yet a different set of mechanisms for doing visualizations and for doing science workflows and things like that. And so it seems to me like there's a user pain point where they have to change their workflow for every new set of data that they're going to. And so maybe the real question we should be asking is there a way to abstract that workflow out to a point where they can express the workflow, and then we can figure out the technology that accomplishes that workflow behind the scenes for them? James, is that the kind of thing you're kind of hinting at there?
That's exactly right. So in terms of working with the stack, when I both build these solutions and I use these solutions as an end user, if my analysis platform is going to be in the Pi data environment and Xarray is my sort of basic unit, I want to get an Xarray object back. How I actually get that through and what APIs it goes through, if it works and it pops up in 2 to 3 seconds, I'm very happy. But it's that common interface. So the part in the demonstration, it wasn't so much the web API. It was just the tooling at the very top, which is, well, here's a JSON object, and JSON is what you want to use. I totally agree. JSON is right for building the web application, but I don't think that would fit in the rest of the workflow. So it just might be a case of putting having Xarray have as a backend the service you're creating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. That from an end user perspective, the technology running on the back end is sort of something that you really shouldn't have to worry about, and just providing the interfaces is what we as cloud developers, we should be providing the interfaces that the users can use just to request their analytic result. And if, like you said, if they get the result back in a matter of seconds, the job is completed successfully. That should be all they care about, whether or not it ran on Spark or Dask or used ZAR or NetCDF or HDF on the back end. Those are all technical details that don't have anything to do with the science being done.
Right. So just while we're on this conversation, I'll put in one other thought, which is the API we use for describing what we're asking for. Right. So within an Xarray environment, is you have some data set, and then we can query it by dimension. But if you're trying to describe your query, what you're asking for, there's several ways of doing that. You're already using things like GEO server in this product, and so you're using some of the OGC standards. I would sort of be curious if this community is following the developments on the OGC API sort of standard, and whether or not that would be a common language to use for doing these kind of queries across several Earth science domains.
Yeah, that's right. The OGC standards is another dimension on this, and we currently we're looking at how to handle synchronous and asynchronous job requests. So you might have some requests that are more long running, and you want to schedule them and queue them up. And then there's the question of how do you manage multiple jobs coming in and prevent one user from dominating all of the resources. And so for that, we have been looking at the WPS standard.
Well, and there is a domain working group that works in exactly this area, and I can't claim that we've been, really shining so far It's the Earth Observation Exploitation Platform working group. It's a domain working group, and it could be that I might be calling on you and some of the other Earth Observation Exploitation Platform folks to come together in a future session at OGC. And maybe we can get to that higher level, like if I'm asking for a correlation map from Giovanni and a correlation map from SDAP, we can call it the same thing and the call can look pretty much the same. I think that's what we want to get to.
Maybe, this is Vardis, maybe I can ask James and also Chris a question in terms of the ZAR examples that I've seen. I've just seen, analyses conducted on gridded data sets. So my question is, what support is available for discrete geometry type data sets, in situ data sets, and also swath data? So I think it would be great to see some more examples of different, more diverse data types and show that those use cases are also supported, which is, really what the main focus of this project is. It's on the integration of different types of spatial data.
Right, and we actually had several interesting talks yesterday afternoon at the ESIP sessions on cloud optimized formats for other types of data structures like Parquet and Entwine point tiles, also TileDB, and any one of those three might work better than ZAR in some of those cases for some of those structures.
No, I was at the no, but what I mean, Chris, is all the examples that are being provided really are just on gridded data sets. So no doubt,
not the Parquet case or the point cloud case.
Say again?
Those were not the point cloud or maybe we could take this offline.
Yeah. No, it would be. I'm not an expert by any means in this area, so I'd just like to know what additional capabilities some of these technologies provide for in situ data as well. Yeah.
And the cloud cluster is actually working on exactly this activity.
Excellent.
I just wanted to give a quick time check that it is the top of the hour, 2 after the top of the hour. So I'm going to stop the live stream for the session. The meeting can stay open if people want to continue to chat. I won't close things out right away, but as a quick reminder, if you have any takeaways, we do ask that in the Kiko chat space for this session, there is a tab that says 3 takeaways. If we could record takeaways that we had from the session in Kiko chat, or if you as attendees, that would be much appreciated. And I hope everyone, Vardis, are you going to pass the survey that you had around for the session? Did you already put that in chat, or are you going to send an email to people?
It's on the Kiko chat.
Okay, great.
And it's it's also in the slides. So just from my perspective and on behalf of the team, I really want to thank everyone for attending this session. Apologies for some of the technical difficulties. It would have been way better to do this in person, but please.